I would like to start this panel with the thing that is hottest in the area of environment, mitigation of climate changes at the moment. November 4th is the first historic date when the agreement for climate changes mitigation as part of the Paris Convention will be enforced. And at the moment, out of 197 countries, 81 countries, which is enough, we have passed the threshold, have ratified and submitted the agreement at the headquarters of United Nations in New York. I'm happy to say that Macedonia is in the process of ratifying the agreement. It has been signed, and I hope that it will be traveling or on its way to New York in the next month. Why is this agreement so important? All of these parties that have agreed to it are going to take actions and responsibility for keeping the rise of the temperature at a world level of up to 2 degrees, or try to keep it at a rise of 1.2 degrees Celsius. As far as it goes for these 81 countries that have already signed the agreement, 60% of the greenhouse emission gases are actually contributed by the first part of the signatories, which is a good sign, and I personally believe that this is a strong commitment coming from the countries of the world. And how we are going to achieve this? So today's panel is about renewable energy, environment, and technology. So environment is all we have, and we don't have a reserve planet. Maybe renewables are a possibility to fight climate change. And technology, of course, is something that, if implemented, can enhance or help us in the process of climate change mitigation. So before asking the panelists today to present themselves, I would like to say a few words about myself. As Biljana announced me, I'm Makedonka Dimitrova. I'm research director at the University American College Skopje, Institute of Entrepreneurship and Leadership Development. I'm also general secretary at the Macedonian Center for Energy Efficiency, one of the first NGOs that brought the agenda of energy efficiency in the country, and happy to say that I'm 5th-year Energy Globe Ambassador to Macedonia.
My name is Karina. I come from Nordic Energy Research. We're a funding institution under the Nordic Council of Ministers. So we're actually one of 19 institutions that work on Nordic collaboration in all parts of society. We were established in 1975, and we work as a platform for cooperative energy research, where we fund R&D projects to promote sustainable energy and low carbon solutions. We also contribute with conducting energy analysis to help Nordic policymaking and contribute to making a sustainable future. So before we go on, just a couple of words about myself. Before I started in Nordic Energy Research, I worked in research for many years. I have a PhD in materials chemistry, and I was specifically working with new materials within nanotechnology and energy technology. And I, for instance, worked with new photovoltaic materials and new methods to develop solar panels. So let's move on to the topic of today and looking at the Nordic situation when it comes to energy. Okay. No. Right. So if we look at the types of energy in the Nordic countries, we see that the largest renewable source in the Nordic countries is biomass. And you can see that this is particularly important for Finland, Sweden, and Denmark. The second largest renewable source is hydropower, which is very important in Norway, Sweden, and Iceland. In Iceland, of course, geothermal power is also very important. And then we have wind energy, which is particularly important in Denmark. After that, you have nuclear power, which is important in Finland and Sweden. And then for the rest of the energy sources, it comes from fossil sources. And this is very important in our transport sector, which is at the moment quite based on fossil fuels. So, if I could get that to work, no? You see this circle on the side here, it's like the total energy resource of the Nordic countries put together. And from that, you can see that there's 38% at the moment, which comes from renewable sources. So we have quite a bit of work to do to get everything over to renewables energy. But the good thing is that the diversity of energy sources in our region makes it actually very suitable for energy cooperation. Because we all agree that we want to have a carbon neutral future. And for doing that, we need a flexible energy system and a grid that can handle all kinds of variations in the renewable sources, because that's one of the issues with renewable energy and these sources, that they are quite variable. So we have to have an energy system and a grid that can balance this. And we need, for instance, in a situation where there's little wind in Denmark, we need a situation where they can import hydropower from Norway. And when there's little water in Norway, we need to be able to import wind energy from Denmark. So what I will go into now is some results from a Nordic Energy Technology Perspectives report that came out this spring. It's an analysis which is based on backcasting from where we want to be in our society in 2050, and then going back and seeing what do we have to do to realize these goals. So the line you can see here is the global amount of CO2 emitted per kilowatt hour when you produce electricity. And according to the International Energy Agency, if we want to meet the 2 degrees target, which was just mentioned, we have to have a significant drop in intensity while producing electricity to reach the 2050 goals. Now, the Nordic situation is quite good in this area. We are already at the little purple dot there. So we emit very little carbon dioxide when we produce electricity. So we're, in a way, 30 years ahead in this. And this is because of energy efficiency when we produce the electricity, and also that we have a lot of renewable sources. So we have had hydropower for a century. We have had nuclear power for 3 decades. And over the last 2 decades, we have been seeing that bioenergy and wind energy have become more and more important. And realizing this is because of the Nordic electricity grid, which is able to balance out the variations in renewable energy. However, electricity only counts, and heat only counts for 30% of our carbon dioxide emissions. The remaining 70% comes from transport and industry, and here we're not so well ahead as in we are in the electricity sector. So just a little about what we were talking about, and the basis for what we're talking about here is this ambition of the Paris Agreement that the average global temperature should at maximum rise with 2 degrees C. And in the Nordic region, we are aiming even lower than that, and we are aiming towards a Nordic carbon neutral And that means that we have to reduce the carbon dioxide emissions in our region by 85% by 2050. So to achieve this reduction, we need a significant increase in the flexibility of our energy system. And this also means we need to increase the amount of trade we're doing within our region and towards Europe. So in the current situation, in 2015, we have a net trade activity with Europe of 28 terawatt hours. And we have a 14 terawatt hours net export to Europe. So what we anticipate by 2030 is that this is going to be doubled. And by 2050, this is the situation that we're anticipating, that we're expecting an increase in activity towards Europe and trade, which is 4 and 5 times as much as it is currently. And what you can also see is that the amount of partners that we're anticipating that we need to trade with has also increased. So now we have been talking about the electricity production in the Nordic region, but this is only 30% of the picture. So if you now look at the remaining 70%, we see that the demand sectors are the most challenging. The transport and industry sector are the heaviest contributors to Nordic CO2 emissions. And it's also anticipated that this will stay this way in the future carbon neutral scenario. Now, in the Nordic Energy Technologies Perspectives 2016 report, they have come up with certain recommendations on how we can reach the 2050 goals for this region. And their main suggestion is that we have to ramp up decarbonization of long-distance transport. And of course also reduce emissions in the industry sector. Now, for the second heaviest contributor to CO2 emissions is power and heat. And here it's important that we plan and make increased incentives for making a more distributed, interconnected, and flexible energy system. And for the third heaviest sector, it's transport and buildings. And here's actually very critical that we accelerate renovation to improve energy efficiency in our existing building mass, because in the Nordic countries it is of course cold in the winters, and we use a lot of energy to heat our buildings. And it's also important that, we shift especially our private transport sector from fossil fueled cars, towards electrical vehicles. So now I've been talking about the challenges we have in the Nordic region, and I would like to go into some of the research that we've been funding in Nordic energy research and the opportunities we have seen come out of this research. So we have, in one of our research programs, there was a project North Soul. They were looking at how you can make a standard off-the-shelf solar panel if it was possible to make it into economically and technically feasible system to make solar panel power parks in the Nordic region. So if you look at the image to the left here, you can see what the power output of a standard solar panel would be in the whole of Europe. And you can see that the power output is not very promising in the northern region. However, if you make a system where you not only angle your solar panel towards the sun with the best possible angle, you also let it move with the sun across your horizon. So in a way, you're tracing the sun to maximize your intensity all the time. You can see that the situation is quite different. You can see that the power output we can get even way up in the north is comparable to what you see for solar panel parks in the south of Europe. So with a bit of clever engineering, you can really totally change the way of using solar panels in the Nordic region, and you make solar panel a reliable and sensible, economically sensible way of producing renewable energy in the Nordic countries. As part of the carbon neutral future, we also need a significant increase in biomass to use for biofuels. And some of the projects that Nordic Energy Research have been funding has a lot of opportunities, has seen a lot of opportunities in this area. So for instance, you can double the amount of biomass we produce with our forest by a specific selection of species that you plant and use in forestry, and also using more of the waste product for normal wood production. And by doing that, you're able to actually make the region self-sufficient for biomass, even in 2050. Although we were expected to need to import 16% of biomass to cover our needs. It's also been shown that we need to shift the private transport sector to electrical vehicles by 2050. But it has been shown that this only needs actually a 10% increase in the power consumption, which comparably is not that much. There also, in the entire transport sector, which also includes long-distance transport, it's been shown that you need to balance using biofuels with hydrogen fuels and electricity to make this happen by 2050. And it's also important to manage the shift, that there are incentives and national policies that make transport able to move smoothly across borders. It doesn't help if you have focused on electrical vehicles in Norway, and then in Sweden you have focused on biofuels. And basically it means you can't cross the border because there's no charging stations in Sweden and there's no way of getting biofuels in Norway. So it has to be a plan for the whole region and how to do this and what to plan for. And of course, it's also imperative then that we decentralize and focus on a flexible energy system. And many of these projects that we have been funding, they have been focusing how to do this, what kind of incentives is needed, what kind of policies are needed, and how to develop this kind of future. So now I've been talking quite a bit about the Nordic opportunities, and of course, I'm no expert in Macedonia, but I thought it would be interesting to look at if some of the resources or opportunities in Macedonia would be comparable to the opportunities and resources we see in the Nordic countries. And from what I could see, there are actually quite a lot of similarities. So from what I could see, there are you have had hydropower for quite some time. Like, for instance, this artificial lake that has been made. You have plenty of green pastures, forests, and opportunities for producing biomass, for instance, using this sort of high productivity forestry plan. And you could also produce biofuels. You also have a common grid system with your surrounding neighbors, which is we in Nordic countries have found that is very important to make a flexible system. You have also obviously a lot better opportunities for exploiting solar power than we have in the Nordic countries, especially if you use this type of tracing system of the sun. You can use a standard off-the-shelf solar panel and get some of the highest intensities of solar power in the whole of Europe. I also saw that you were starting out building wind power parks as recently as 2013, I think. So From what I can see, there's a lot of opportunities here, and there are a lot of development possibilities. So it's really important that you work together with your neighbors, you find what common possibilities you have, and develop this to a common future, basically. So it's not a way to being dependent on your neighbors, it's a way of being interdependent with your neighbors and develop something together. Like, for instance, in the Nordic countries, we're very small countries, economically wise, on a world basis. But together, we can actually make an impact. And I believe that this could be some of the same situation in Macedonia with your neighboring countries. So for me, it seems that there are a lot of opportunities here that you could exploit. So, if you want to learn more about this, there's a couple of big reports here that are online. I also have some executive summaries of these reports, if you're interested, so just come find me after the session. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Karina. I do agree with Karina that maybe interconnecting the Western Balkan countries would be the first move towards a wider region in the Balkans. And I agree that actually we have a lot of similarities. Almost 50% of all the energy needs are supplied by imports in Macedonia. We even have to import high-quality coal in order to feed the thermal power plants. So there is possibility, as you have mentioned, tapping on the renewables, maybe the solar energy in the first place. Thank you. Please, Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Peter Kaznacheev, and I'm the managing partner of Khaznah Strategies, a company which is advising private companies and governments on how to innovate at an age of lower prices, lower oil prices, lower commodity prices, and how to advance energy innovation. I'm also a director of a think tank. It seems that this is a general trend. I heard during the previous session that Macedonia2025 is also moving more towards think tank work. So we also started our own think tank. It's called the Center for Resource Economics, and I'm the director of this think tank. Joseph Schumpeter, the famous Austrian-American economist, once said that pessimists' views seem to the public mind to be more profound than optimistic ones. So basically, we often, through the lens of mass media, we often look at events, and for example, at events in energy markets, through a lens of pessimism. What I'm going to talk about, I hope, will convince you that there is less ground for pessimism and more ground for optimism, especially concerning energy markets, commodity markets, and opportunities for you in innovation. What is the biggest source of pessimism, if you think about it right now? What is everyone talking about? Well, in my line of business, it's certainly the oil price. A lot of people are worried about the drop in oil prices. You hear it everywhere. Governments are worried. Oil-producing governments are worried because they have less money, less rents from selling oil and gas. Companies are worried because they have less profits. Then renewable energy producers are worried because at cheaper oil prices, it's less profitable to produce alternative energy, right? Finally, the Bank of Japan, as we heard this morning, is also worried, and the European Central Bank is worried because of deflation. So lower oil prices put pressure and accelerate deflation, right? So a lot of worries out there, but I think that we need to look at history and we need to understand better the causes of what happened, and that will bring more optimism. For the last 4 decades, we've been living in what I would call an age of inflated oil prices. Oil on a commercial basis started being produced in the 19th century, more than 150 years ago, first time in Pennsylvania, and since then it largely followed a more or less flat price trajectory. I mean stable, not as volatile. But something happened 4 decades ago, in 1973, something that caused that price inflation. And to understand why prices dropped now, it's important to understand why they increased in the first place. So, 1973 was the war of Yom Kippur in the Middle East. And several countries were involved. What Egypt and Saudi Arabia decided was to use what they called an oil weapon, an oil embargo against Western countries. As a result, prices, nominal prices, jumped 12-fold. They increased 12 times in a matter of 4 months. So it was the biggest ever increase in oil prices. Since then, basically, as we know, 2 factors have been moving the oil price. And moving it upwards. One was OPEC decisions to cut production. Everyone was following what the Saudi king and then the Saudi oil minister would say, right? And the second trigger of price rises were conflicts in the Middle East, political and military conflicts. The war of Yom Kippur, the Iranian Revolution, and then the Iran-Iraq War, and then later in the 2000s, after 9/11, it was the invasion of Iraq, which again inflamed that region. But something happened in 2014. Something interesting happened. That logic of OPEC decisions influencing the price and military conflicts inflating the price suddenly stopped working. If you look at this picture, you will see that Brent crude oil prices since May 2014 and until the end of last year basically decreased more than twice, while the Middle East, as we know, was in flames. The emergence of the Islamic State, war in Yemen, Charlie Hebdo attacks attributed again to Islamic extremism, Russia intervening in Syria, and so on and so forth. But what happens in previous years, that would definitely cause a price increase. But what we are seeing is the exact opposite. More, not just that military conflicts stopped having such a influence on the oil price, it's also that OPEC itself stopped having that influence. Since 2 years ago, when the price first dropped, OPEC tried to agree an oil production cut, and it couldn't. So we saw in Doha earlier this year an attempt between Russia, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Venezuela to extend OPEC, include Russia, agree a production freeze, as they call it. And what happened to the price? Basically nothing. The market was not impressed. We saw the same happening in Algiers in October. We saw the same happening recently in Istanbul when Putin decided to join the OPEC freeze, but the markets were not impressed. The oil price didn't react very much. So what is happening? Why? I call it the age of the oil zen, when the markets are so tranquil, they're in a position of zen, where they're not reacting to these military conflicts in the Middle East, to OPEC's decision, and that seems to be very different from previous years. So why oil zen? The main reason for it is innovation, energy innovation. The United States, and that's a little noticed fact, 2014 was not just the drop of the oil price, but it was also the year when the United States, for the first time since the 70s, surpassed Russia and Saudi Arabia in the absolute volume of oil production. So the balance shifted from Saudi Arabia, from OPEC, and from Russia to an entirely different economic system, which is much more based on innovation. The shale revolution is an example of that, and it was a driving force. So that's crucially important. Moreover, due to what is often referred to as securitization of commodity markets, now not just the oil price, but other prices of commodities are somewhat synced together. We can see it. So the last several years have seen a drop not just in oil prices, but also in prices of metals, prices of coal, and other commodities. So there is a commodity shift, commodity trend of lower prices. What effect does it have on societies? Well, we've seen that countries like, for example, Brazil, an oil and mining country, saw massive protests. People were demanding more transparency. They were protesting against corruption. At one point, 7 million Brazilians went to the streets to protest. That resulted, on one day, that resulted in the impeachment of Dilma Rousseff. We saw something very interesting and unusual happening in Nigeria before that, with the change of power, again on an anti-corruption agenda. Malaysia, the 1MDB scandal, which again jeopardized the political system or weakened it. And finally, the Mossack Fonseca scandal on a global scale, the Panama Papers, and that revealed corruption in a whole list of oil economies, and in Saudi Arabia, in Russia, in the Emirates, in Algeria, in Venezuela. Speaking of which, Venezuela is an example of what I would say oil economy failure. That's where you don't want to go, right? Right now, Venezuela, and it is a little-known fact, who in the world has the biggest oil reserves? What do you think? Most people say Saudi Arabia or Russia, but in fact, the biggest proven oil reserves are in Venezuela. And despite all of that, we're seeing food shortages in this country. GDP per capita in real terms is lower today than it was 50 years ago. So that's really an example of failure. But that led some people to argue that there is a resource curse, so you're cursed if you have oil. I disagree with that, actually. If you look at examples of countries like, for example, Australia, or Canada, or Norway, in oil and gas, or mining countries like Chile, for example, then the story is very different. They managed to build a modern, prosperous economy with a large share of GDP coming from natural resources. And that's an excellent motivation. I think there are two lessons for you, for Macedonia, and for innovators and people from business from other countries, also from the Macedonian diaspora. The first lesson is, as I said, there is no resource curse. You can prosper while producing natural resources. And the examples I mentioned, Canada, Australia, Chile, people say, well, those are bigger economies, right? They seem to be of little relevance to Macedonia. Okay, I have another example for you. Take Armenia. Their economy was in a state of complete collapse after the breakup of the Soviet Union. They had a big resource base, specifically molybdenum. So they managed to rekindle their mining sector by opening it up, creating very low barriers, a bit like the Georgian scenario that we heard earlier today, but they did it in mining. And as a result, they privatized all Soviet factories. They lured in investors And they first invited a German-Armenian partnership, and then they ended up with 12 different private players. And today, 1/5 of their industrial production comes from mining, from 0 to 1/5. The second, and I think this is relevant to Macedonia because you have reserves of gold, copper, nickel, and so on, which can be produced, and investors could be very interested in that. The second lesson is that Macedonia can, and now you will think I'm crazy, but Macedonia can become an oil economy. But not in the conventional sense that we're used to. It doesn't mean that someone will start drilling here for oil or gas. No, there's not sufficient. There are no sufficient resources. What I mean is something different. What I mean is exactly the innovative revolution that happened in the last decade. In the United States, what happened is that 13,000 small and medium innovative technological oil companies were the ones which made that revolution happen. And today, 13,000 small companies account for 58% of oil and gas production. It's this view that usually people think, oh, it's Chevron, Exxon, and ConocoPhillips. No, actually, 13,000 small companies. And look at, for example, Russia. It's less than 13, not 13,000. And Saudi Arabia, well, it's just 1, right? So that's the difference. You can innovate and you can achieve results. Given that Macedonia has such a big diaspora, Macedonians are already represented in energy companies, in mining companies, as we know. For example, my friend Luna Mosky, who is unfortunately not here with us, but in the Canadian Kinross Gold. There is space for innovation, and I'll give you, just to, before I finish, just one example. The think tank I mentioned, Center for Resource Economics, we're studying the application of artificial intelligence to energy, to oil and gas, and to the energy industry. Such things as smart field, smart well, digitalization, big data, and various ways of advancing efficiency of companies using artificial intelligence. And guess who is doing our research on this topic? It's Nikola Kurczewski, a junior member of the board of Macedonia2025, who works in our think tank. So here you go, Macedonians, innovators in modern energy. So I think that I would like to just say that the creative destruction that Joseph Schumpeter was talking about is something that you can lead, that you can use for your benefit, and I mean you as innovators, as venture capitalists, computer scientists, data analysts, angel investors, computer geeks, you name it. Join forces and use this opportunity. It's there. Go for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I will save my comments and questions for later on. I'm sure there are already questions in the audience. Please, Boris, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before I introduce myself and go into my presentation, I would just like to express my deep appreciation for the Macedonia2025 team, for what they're doing for this country, and also to express my appreciation for Snezhina, my dear and like-minded friend who invited me and opened the doors to this organization for me. So my name is Boris Manev. I'm of Macedonian origin, currently residing and working in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. I work for a Japanese technology company called Seiko Epson Corporation. Seiko started this business with watchmaking and then used the micro-precision know-how to develop products like printers, projectors, robots, and the most recent product is the first world's in-house recycling paper machine. Within this organization, I'm responsible for the sustainability matters, sustainability affairs. across the Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Russia region. And in this role, I deal, if I can, I deal with all the aspects from sustainability. But if I can summarize it, my main responsibility is influencing externally the policy-making field, and influencing internally the product design and development in order to meet current market needs and future requirements in respect to sustainability. So today I would like to talk about a very hot topic in the EU. It's called the circular economy. It's something which has been giving me a headache for some months now. The EU circular economy as a concept, or the circular economy as a concept, initially started in the UK with the MacArthur's Foundation, who defined this concept as an economy which is restorative and regenerative by nature, and which keeps the value to all the products, the materials, the components used throughout their entire life cycle. So they never lose on value. Very soon after MacArthur Foundation published this definition, the Dutch government was the first one to jump in, publish a circular economy action plan. And very recently, actually a year ago, in December 2015, the EU the European Commission published its circular economy action plan. So I will talk more about what is the circular economy action plan, even though it's still a very unclear concept, even though the European Commission established actions in several important areas such as product design, waste recycling, opening of secondary markets for raw materials. It's still a very unclear concept. It's still not know how it will be implemented in practice. It's also important to understand that the circularity concept does not replace sustainability concept. The sustainability concept, which the sustainability definition, which is meeting today's needs while not compromising the needs of the future generation, is still very valid. But within the 30 years of its existence, it proved that it's not sufficient motivator for behavioral change. So, on the other hand, the circular concept is about improving the economy as a whole. So to say that establishing business models that are automatically ensuring the combination of planet and profit. To move into my second point, and that is linear to circular and impact on business as usual. So again, this is another question mark. Nobody can say now what the impact will be. Currently, most of the businesses worldwide are having their business models on a linear model. That is to say, get cheap resources, put them into manufacturing process, create a product, transfer the ownership of the product to the customer with sales, and then when the customer feels that the product is devaluated, ends up in landfill and it has no more value. The circular business models calls for sustainability throughout the chain, and the products become circular only when every part of the life cycle of the product, the creation of the product, is being met. So at this moment, I'm not aware of any businesses that are fully circular, but we see many attempts globally of companies trying to implement circular business models. Some examples, to name a few, are, for example, the sharing platform. So we have car sharing platform, equipment sharing platform, you name it. It's Uber. An example is Uber. It's Airbnb. It's various kind of platforms where instead of owning a product, the product is being shared. Furthermore, there is performance-based contracting. So, for example, to take an example from my own industry, no longer a business would buy a printer. The supplier would provide the printer in the office, and the business pays by the copy printed. So, in this way, the ownership of the product is not transferred to the user, but is still with the supplier, and in this way, the materials, the components, and everything stays with the supplier. The supplier has interest to have more and more copies printed, and in this way, repairs the product, replaces old parts, and keeps the life of the product as long as possible. Another example is cradle-to-cradle products, which is a very old concept, but basically different kind of products being used in the office, such as recycled carpets, furniture, and so on. So there's many examples like this. However, it's also very clear that the circular economy is not going to happen on its own, same as it didn't happen for the sustainability economy. So what is very much lacking is the powerful demand. So for a company to be able to invest in a circular business model, it's quite high investment. So the company needs to have a clear understanding of the rate of return of the investment, the time of return of the investment, and so on. Currently, with the existing concept, with the existing market, this is not possible to determine. So companies are very reluctant to put enough resources of developing circular-based products and business models. For this reason, the European Commission or the European authorities, by the way, the European have decided to create a powerful demand for circular products and implement circularity into their public procurement policies. And you might know, but the European institutions are the biggest consumer in the EU, with 1.8 trillion euros spent annually, which makes 14% of the EU GDP. So this is definitely, if the European institutions decide to implement this kind of concept within their public procurement directives, then for sure this will drive the circular economy business model. Just to give you an example, I spent the last three weeks traveling across Europe with a delegation from Japan, meeting with public procurement authorities, trying to understand what are their current, their future ambitions in terms of implementing circularity within their procurement. And I must say, unlike so far, this was the first time I have seen that all of them, starting from Italy, Wales, Scotland, Germany, Spain, they were all singing the same song. And even though it's not clear for them yet what exactly those requirements will be, all of them are including environmental, social responsibility requirements within their criteria for choosing when placing a tender. So this would bring, so if we say that, let's say we're moving in this kind of direction, the European institutions, and probably followed globally, are going to implement the circularity business model, then as a business, I would ask, what are the risks and opportunities for me? To put it very bluntly and simple, it's with like everything else in history and in business, those who are able to envision the future, those who are able to prepare for the future, to meet the market requirements of the future, are going to grow their businesses, are going to grow their shares of the market, are going to make profit. Those who will decide to ignore the new world, the new requirements, it's quite clear what happens. We had an example, I'll give Kodak as an example, who declared bankruptcy after so many years of business, after inventing the photography, just because they decided not to adopt the new world that is moving from analog to digital technology. So I also think that this is a great opportunity, of a greater opportunity for small and medium-sized enterprises than for big corporations. And the reason for that is, as a big corporation, you have already well-established industrial processes, manufacturing processes, very high fixed costs, fixed running costs, and it's very difficult to experiment without having a clear business case, a clear business model, a clear return on investment. While small and medium-sized enterprises are more flexible in terms of not having such high fixed costs, are able to get subsidies from the government, which in the case of the circular economy, this will definitely be the case. The European Commission institutions are preparing financial incentives to motivate small and medium-sized enterprises of moving towards circularity. So to get to my last question, what's at stake for Macedonia's businesses? I think this is a question that each of you who are business folks in this room should answer. I would say that if I was a person, if I had a business, a small and medium-sized enterprise on my own, then I would definitely collaborate with many different players within the supply chain of my industry, of my products across Europe, try to come up with common business models, try to embrace the possibility of developing new products which could which could be the products of the future. So with this, I will leave it to everybody to think of what's at stake for their own business and for the businesses, especially in Macedonia. And I hope that, the circular economy will have a good impact for developing business in Macedonia as well. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Boris. One question for everybody. When is the last time you drove your bike to your workplace? Not many hands in the air. Francesco, please give us some more suggestions about how we can make our city smart.
It's an immense pleasure and an honor to be here. I really want to thank Macedonia2025 for this invitation. Biljana Markovic for impeccable organization before the summit and now. Dr. Vlaho Kostov for inviting me. It's a real discovery and I really appreciate it. I am really sorry, but not so much for the 3-2 win against Macedonia of Italy last week. So I apologize, but not too much. And the second thing, but Goran Pandev is a striker of my home team. So we are even on that. Yes, that's for Goran. We have a derby on Saturday, so he better score. We started this whole meeting with the issue of sustainable development. And sustainable development cannot be successfully tackled if we don't manage to design our urban environment in a way that is compatible with it. Now, just two numbers. I want to try to keep the whole thing short so as to invite also questions. 54% of the global population lives in cities today, 2014. And this increases by 1.6% per year in the next 15 years. That's a forecast. In Europe, in the EU, 78% of people live in cities, and GDP produced within cities is 85%. So we can talk about everything, we can talk about the environment, but if we don't tackle what's going on in the cities, we will never manage to get anywhere. I am an American-trained economist, US-trained economist, but as soon as I finished, I went back to my hometown, to Genoa, because, well, an insane passion for my hometown, like the diaspora shows for Macedonia. I went back, and I had the opportunity to work on various endeavors. My last one, as a deputy mayor, was in charge of economic development and the smart city. And this really took a passion of itself for me, which is why now I am working as an independent consultant on these issues. And what Ms. Stavrov said at the beginning of this meeting, what the chair so clearly stated also is, and what the two speakers before me very clearly expressed, is that all these issues, so renewables, energy efficiency, circular economy, this all is mostly centered around cities. With all their other activities, mobility, waste management, building efficiency, connectivity, not only. Cities have to tackle issues of civic integration, social support, cultural and touristic attraction. All these things are what we can refer to as issues that belong to the smart city. Now, what is it? I tried a short summary there. It's, of course, very succinct. But it is a concept that relates to a process to increase the quality of life of your citizens through sustainable economic development. Research and development, high-tech, based and driven by local leadership. So basically, it is something where you have a very fecund interplay between the authorities, local leadership, politics, if you want to put it this way, administration, and the private sector, which has the technical capabilities, the knowledge also to get the products and the results you're looking for. Now, first caveat, and I'm talking a bit cross-sectional here. What it is not, and this is too often forgotten by the industry, I've had the possibility to see it firsthand, is it is not a one-size-fits-all approach. All cities are different. All cities have different needs, have different structures, have different problems and opportunities. And therefore, it needs a lot of flexibility in the approach. The other caveat, or if you want, it's a central tenet, is that, as I said before, technological products and systems, what we call smart solutions, are absolutely central, but they have to be aligned with local needs and priorities. They can't be put before the actual things, if I may express it this way, that a community needs. And there's often a mismatch, also I would say in communication, or maybe in cultural terms, between industry, the private sector, and the local authorities. And therefore, a very dynamic process has to be started. Local authorities have to challenge their stakeholders, be them citizens, be them private businesses, be they research and development subjects, to come up with, I would call it, a blueprint for the vision of the future. And then this can be brought together with what the industry has to offer or may design specifically for these realities. On the very positive side, there is a great potential for dynamic industries. They can tap into a huge, also diversified markets. As I said, they have to show a degree of adaptability and the suppleness, but they can find incredibly attractive business spaces. Two mistakes that I often see have to be avoided. One is this is mostly for the big entities, not so much for the very flexible startups. They don't have to try to bully their way into a public administration. This is a fatal mistake. It calls for rejection, basically, and it will not succeed. And as I said, be able to adapt to the specific situations of the city. On the other hand, and it's been incredibly interesting to see how the last 20 years have been for Georgia, for Slovenia, local leadership has to get their act together everywhere. This goes for Germany, but it goes very much for Italy, so if I relate to my example. And they have to develop a process through participation with all relevant stakeholders that you could call it, without the negative sound of it, an integrated planning, an integrated process, which is not at all easy to apply. We talked, it was very interesting to hear about how corruption has been tackled in many different situations, but just to change the behavior of administrations, of public administrations, even without these negative things, is incredibly complicated because things are done this way, and therefore to do them in another way, in a more innovative way, is incredibly complicated. It's a real challenge that has to be tackled. Now, another thing that is very important is to enhance the cooperation with partner cities. When I was deputy mayor, the first thing we did is to create a memorandum of understanding with Milan and Torino, the old industrial triangle of northern Italy, in order to exchange best practices, so not to double the work done on different platforms, and at the same time, as important, although not easily acknowledged, to avoid mistakes that have already been done. This is something that is not heard or taken kindly, but is something that saves you so much time and so much resources, so much money, which is such a scarce resources in public administrations, which makes really a difference. Getting to the financing part, All this has to be paid for, of course. And I can tell you there are some situations which I envied very much. Barcelona is a city that doesn't need anything. They just do their smart city projects almost by themselves. In cash-strapped realities, what you have to do is ally with other cities and go for European funds, basically. This is the thing. There are lots. In the 2014-2020 programming, there's a huge amount of financial resources that is being poured into smart cities and communities projects, which has trans-border partnerships as a quite stringent prerequisite. Now, if you think that this context for the exporting European knowledge has been estimated at 1.3 trillion in 2020, well, there's a really huge market in these activities, and therefore the community is really investing in it and in giving the right incentives. Although I could say it could always be more. Take some from agriculture and move it into these more innovative initiatives. But still, it's a good start. And I'm gonna finish here just by saying one thing, that all taken and having read how Macedonia is placed, I think that it is very well positioned to enter in this broadening line of business. It could really thrive in it because, as we have seen, like the few slides before, the skills, the educational advantage, I would call it. One of the huge problems I had when I became the deputy mayor, in the whole administration of the city of Genoa, 6,000 people, you had maybe half a dozen who could fluently speak English and go to meetings. This is a problem. You teach it from kindergarten. I think this is a great advantage, and also the strategic centrality of the country as well. Its pre-accession status. Just to give you one thing, Skopje could enter as a follower in a so-called lighthouse project of Horizon 2020 with EU cities in order to get to those funding and acquire that knowledge. I think this is a great opportunity, and I think this city could be poised to get into it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francesco. We would now take questions from the audience, as we have less than 15 minutes. I'm sure that this is a very interesting topic and we would have fruitful discussion. We have a question in the audience.
You can go there first.
Okay, just go ahead. Please.
Well, first, thank you for the panel for a very informative session. And as I was listening to all the speakers, it just seems to me there's tons of opportunities out there and capital available to pursue some of these very innovative kind of initiatives, but at least the more developed countries, partially in the European Union and also more globally. So if you're a small to medium-sized business in Macedonia and you have capacity for certain production, right? Or you're a larger facility that wants to kind of take advantage of these massive trends and money available potentially, right? How can you go about reaching out into these markets and becoming, potentially a vendor or, a supplier or participant and benefiting from this either capital that's available, funds, governmental funds, or smart city initiatives that are being pushed in the more developed parts of the European continent? I don't know who would want to take that on.
So I will give an example to answer a question. I will just give an example of a case I had very recently. So we were approached by a consortium of 20 different organizations from research institutions, material producers, recyclers, logistics companies, and so on. So 20 different organizations approached Epson and they asked us if we want to participate in this EU-funded project. Value of the fund for us as a company was around almost €1 million for a 2-year period to cover costs for head costs and so on. So all we had to do was to share with the other organizations what are our requirements in order to produce a circular printer. So what kind of materials we need to put in our molds, what kind of recycled plastics and so on to produce this printer. I found it as a great opportunity, but when I started discussing with my management, we found that the risks of participating in this kind of project are much higher than the potential benefits we can receive, especially because we couldn't make a business case and what would be the additional return on investment that we would have to make. The other few companies, so unfortunately we had to refuse this kind of offer because there's plenty of risk involved in terms of the production stops, gets damaged from wrong material and so on, and then we lose a lot of fixed and also revenue costs. But all the other organizations which were part of this consortium were small and medium-sized enterprises, very innovative, small organizations, 10 people who were working on creating a circular phone, so a phone made out of 100% recycled materials that never loses on value and so on, also some other appliances, and these companies received the same amount of money, but for them was really an opportunity to further grow and develop and use the know-how of the other institutions, research institutions, material producers and so on. So for them the risk was much, much lower. So if I'm for a small and medium-sized enterprises in Macedonia who can also benefit from the EU funds or can just get in a consortium, so speak with not like-minded but same interest business parties in Germany or the UK and so on, and just be part of this consortium, they will also benefit from this kind of financial incentive and support for R&D activities. And of course then this know-how stays in the company and can further grow into more commercial scale production of these products.
Also, there is a SME innovation tool coming from the European Union that Macedonia is eligible to. The only thing you need is to find somebody that would write a approximately 450 pages project that would make the small and medium enterprises more innovative by implementing innovative technology, or to save energy by enhancing the machines or the production line itself. There are also a number of credit lines that are available. For example, the Western Balkans Energy Efficiency Financing Facility that is now in the second stage. The interest rate for using these loans for becoming more energy efficient, both in services or production sector, is less than 2%. So there are possibilities. We just need to be alert. Please, we have the mic there.
Let me introduce first. My name is Janina Stamenkova, company Delta Project, license for energy audits. I have a question for Ms. Karina. Which energy sources for electrical energy for electrical vehicles is foreseen in the strategy 2050? In a sense, renewable or not renewable?
Well, I mean, in our strategy for 2050, it's basically based on fully renewable sources. But it's a combination of, well, battery vehicles, hydrogen-fueled vehicles, and it's also biofuels. Especially for transport on the roads and at sea, long-distance transport, it has to be biofuels because it doesn't make sense, or it's not financially viable to try to make that as electrical vehicles or EVs. So I'm not sure if that answered your question, but yeah.
There is an effort in Macedonia. We have a few think tanks and experts have started an initiative for vision for decarbonization of the production of electrical energy in Macedonia. So we believe that the next sector to tackle will be the transport sector.
The Nordic energy, you stated that the basic ways that we can get energy is from the fossils, from the wind, from the sun, from the water, and also you mentioned biofuel. Macedonia has the wind, the sun, the water, but no oil. But Macedonia has something else, and we do have a lot of land, wasted land, which can be used to grow plants which can produce alternative energy. We have, I believe that the amount of wasted land is something close to 75%. And I think it will be something that Macedonia maybe already is working on to exploit that area of production of oil. We know that Brazil heavily relying on biofuel, getting it from various plants. We know that in Europe, Germany is a country which is leading in biofuel. We also know that most of the governments now imposing minimum percentage of biofuel to be incorporated in their supplying of oil. I don't know what is percentage. I believe in between 2 and 12% somewhere. Now, I'm not quite sure, and maybe someone can help me to better understand. Does Macedonia or anyone in Macedonia has made any feasibility study where they can evaluate possibilities of growing rapeseed or alternative plants where we can get oil? Oil is very expensive. We have cheap labor. We have the land, and I think we should be able to produce our own oil, even to export if this is fuel.
Well, my initial comment would be I totally agree with you that this sounds like a great opportunity for you. And it also sounds like an opportunity that you should perhaps try to collaborate with some of these countries you were talking about. I mean, there are several, for instance, under EU's Horizon 2020 program, there are several, initiatives where research, for instance, in this area, you could be part of that and receive funds to develop this. And one of the projects I'm working on in Nordic energy research is being part of a smart grid initiative under Horizon 2020. And I mean, in many of these, it's totally necessary that there are several countries and you should explore something together. So, I mean, it sounds to me like you have a great opportunity here. And with regards to developing forests or developing oil production from those seeds, for instance, I would be happy to suggest some researchers you can talk to and put you in contact with people if that's of interest.
In fact, the energy strategy and the strategy for utilization of renewable resources by 2030 of the Republic of Macedonia are envisioning mass or different types of plants to be used towards production of alternative fuels. There have been some movements towards taking activities in this direction, but we still need a lot of finances, a lot of awareness, a lot of education to reach the targets we have actually set. There was one more question, yes?
Yes. First of all, I would like to share with you an example about using our bicycles and other means of transportation. I work for the cement plant of Skopje, and for the past 2 years we have a program that every Wednesday is a day without cars, meaning we promote our people, about 300 employees, to come to work with public transportation, with bicycles or even to walk. And at this day, how it goes, whoever decides to come with a car, normally the free parking at this day costs 150 dinars that are collected. And after some period of time, the company doubles the amount and we donate it to the hospital for lung diseases. At the same time, the people who decide to come with bicycle are given a voucher that means free lunch in our canteen, and at the same time, this is a ticket that they play a lottery to win a bicycle after 2 months. This is one of the examples. I wanted to thank Ms. Karina about the presentation about Nordic countries' experience for energy, but I would like also to ask for some institutional measures that actually drove these changes to come to this level, meaning how it was some legislation measures or some examples how to motivate and actually drive the society to improve the waste to energy, to some of the mechanisms that were used. Let's say maybe the pricing of waste disposal was active part of this, or water treatment stations. Please share some experiences how we can do part of this. Thank you.
Yeah, let's, for instance, one of the things we have done in Norway is, I think we perhaps have the most electrical vehicles in the whole of Europe compared to our population. And this has been done by reducing taxes and fees on buying electrical vehicles. So it's financially viable there's to buy an electrical car compared to a fossil fueled car, because electrical cars are more expensive to produce. But there's also several other possibilities. It's easier to, I mean, you have different lanes for electrical vehicles. You have parking spaces that are just for electrical vehicles. You can charge your car. There are a lot of these things that had made sure that there's a lot of electrical vehicles on the roads in Norway, for instance. Although we have far to go. I mean, it's at the moment, I think we're at 2.6% electrical vehicles. So we have quite a far to go. In Sweden, for instance, there was a few winters ago, it was a situation where the oil prices were quite high and it was a cold winter. And in this situation, then biomass was a competitive source for energy. And then they were able to actually start producing a lot of biomass and shifting heating of homes into using, for instance, pellets instead of oil or anything else that pollutes. So there's certain incentives you can do, but it has to be something that includes the whole system. I mean, you have to. The main thing, I think, is to combine both the researchers that might have good ideas. You have to get the industry interested. Getting the industry interested is also making sure that there are, economical interest here, that they can make money on something. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And to do that, you have to have policies that follow up on this and make all of this financially interesting. I'm sure there's several other examples as well, but I don't know if that's, yeah.
I just wanted to add something and say that because I represent more what is called conventional energy rather than renewable, I used to work for BP before I started with my colleagues this consulting service. And BP was the first company to adopt this green policy and call itself Beyond Petroleum. It used to be British Petroleum, now it's Beyond Petroleum. So I think that today's energy companies are not simply conventional or alternative energy. And the whole notion of conventional alternative seems to be outdated. Today it's innovative energy. And old oil companies become mixed energy companies. Not as quickly as some people thought, but they will be there, because someone asked about the energy mix in 50 years, or to 2050, sorry. I think that oil will not be the main fuel. And not because the world will run out of oil. It will not. Like, we didn't decrease our coal consumption because we ran out of coal. We didn't switch from horses to cars because we ran out of horses. It's innovation which will lead to new energy sources, and it's innovation and efficiency which will make it happen.
Okay, any more questions from the audience? Yes, please.
Actually, I have a question for Francesco. Thanks for your insights in the smart cities. I was wondering whether you could enlighten us up a little bit on what you found as a possible, let's say, resistance within your team when you were working in Genoa that could possibly, I mean, apart from, let's say, there could be a political landscape, circumstances that you could envision that you can generalize that could be transferable, let's say, to Skopje. And a second one, it's a big topic, so I'll just if you can summarize in few, how would you envision a cities of the future? Because that's actually the title. You already gave us some ideas how Skopje could get involved. From what you've seen so far, because your first time now in Skopje in Macedonia, probably less than 24 hours, if you could give us some idea on that front.
Yes, thank you. What I found is something that was somehow, I wouldn't say unexpected, but a very lucky combination of factors. The ecosystem of the city was already quite well structured around the idea of the smart city. Genoa has been the only city in the European Union to win all 3 smart city calls that the Commission launched in 2011-2012. There were 3 separate calls. Now there's only one that's called Lighthouse, which is more complicated, admittedly. But at the time, there were 3 calls in transportation, in energy efficiency, and in ICT. And the only city that won them, because the process was already going strong. The Genoa Smart City Association, led by City Hall, but with a very convinced following by the business community and the research system of the city, was underway. So this was very, very positive and also rare compared to other realities. The main problems I encountered were within the administration. There are strong resistances to change, let me call it that way, the going business model, even within administrations. The previous minister from Slovenia said it for his government during the crisis, 2008. It's very similar. Think of the procurement, the public procurement process. If you want to go smart, you have to change that. You have to innovate in that. These are just processes that take political will, but it takes also the belief in this innovation. For instance, from my colleague from Public Works. He wasn't that innovative. I'm not going to name names because it's useless, but to convince him to proceed in a certain way takes lots of time and lots of effort. On top of that, and that goes down, of course, in the ranks. So this is something that really has to be worked on. The other lucky thing, and it's a partial answer also to Mr. Arsov, the question he asked before, is that the linkages, the networking with other cities was well underway, and this is essential. And one thing to relate to the local situation is you need feelers. You need people who are able to know what's going on in Brussels and who are able to relate to other cities, knowing who is going into the consortia, as Boris was saying before. How are these being built? Epson is being contacted because, well, it's Epson. It's a big thing. But the smaller startups, they don't have this capacity to go autonomously. So this is why a strong local leadership is is needed. Well, a government can do stuff, but if cities start having relationships with other ecosystems, this helps a lot the smaller realities coming up and therefore aggregating in there and getting all those opportunities which are a game changer for many of them. Because it's like basically public venture capital, you could call it. It comes from Brussels, but it changes their budgets for 1, 2, 3 years. And it gives them the possibility to do research and development on their terms and then, well, market the whole thing and build on that. So I think this is essential, and this is a job from local authorities that have to understand the potential and have to get the right networking to get this going. I think that even Macedonia2025 can work towards that.
Well, I would like to thank the audience and our today's panelists for the insightful presentations and answers. I agree that it's all about leadership, and I was pretty happy to see that we have this green bag. I don't know how much energy was used to produce it, but I hope that you will use it at least 10 times and become efficient yourself. Thank you.